Hi, and welcome to another session of In Dialogue series at Louisiana Children's Museum. I am so excited today because so many people ask us about this topic. We have a very special guest, Bridget Hampstead from Fish in a Tree is here. She's the founder, and what else do you do there, Bridget?
I'm also the director.
And the director. So welcome to you, and I have some questions for you that families have been asking us, and I know at the end of this, we'll have a lot of resources for families if they have further questions.
Absolutely.
How have you been?
I am well. How are you?
Good, good. So this happened Sunday, actually. I was advertising for In Dialogue series, and someone said, "What is neurodiversity?" And that's my very question I want to ask you. Tell us what neurodiversity is.
So neurodiversity is a relatively new concept that has come about in response to the medical model of disability, which states that various conditions are disabilities and that they're disabling for people and that they're a problem for society. And that reaction is the identification of neurological conditions and developmental conditions as natural variations in human neurology and not deficits. And so with that idea and that shift, there is this idea that not only do we need to embrace and celebrate people with neurological differences, but we need to make sure that our public spaces, our common spaces, and our policies and procedures in the workplace and in other environments, that they are inclusive of people with neurological differences.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's the first part that I will never be able to answer that as well as you, but I'll practice. I'll practice. Tell us about the movement. And I know this is something that some people, just Sunday, you know, the mom was like, I don't even know what that is, but you're hearing it a lot more. So how's that going?
Yes. So I just wanted to acknowledge that our audience is largely made up of parents of neurodivergent children, or neurodivergent questioning children. And, some of these ideas that I'm presenting may seem radical and may be a bit of a challenge. And we're just going to touch briefly on them in this interview. So if you all are looking for a more in-depth approach to these various topics, Fish in a Tree is doing a webinar series that you can access for a more thorough understanding of all of these topics. But your question was about the movement. The movement came about in the 1990s in response to this medicalization and pathologization of neurodivergent conditions such as autism and ADHD especially, but also Tourette's and learning differences like dyslexia and dyspraxia, et cetera. And so the movement was made up of neurodivergent people who had grown up under this medical model of disability. And those neurodivergent people became adults, and they looked at the world around them, and they founded this movement that really chose to shift the focus from the individual to the society and the environment in which those people live. The movement is, in some spaces seen as radical. Mm-hmm. It's not any more radical than identifying people of other races as different and not disordered, mm-hmm. or people of different eye color or hair color, not as deficient or disordered, but as a natural variation in humanity.
What year was that those adults got together and started to, was that pretty recent?
It was in the 1990s.
Okay.
So Judy Singer is largely credited with being the leader of that movement.
Okay.
She published a book, and other people in her camp and group also published books that are still read today. More recently, some very good books to access are Unmasking Autism, recently came out. I will put together a book list and
Yes.
have it available to our audience.
And we have a parent-teacher resource room, and we're always looking for some good titles to share with parents. So yes, and I want to read those too. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the social model of disability versus the medical model.
Sure. So, like I said before, this was really a movement that came about in response to the medical model of disability. And the medical model of disability states that differences in neurology are deficits and that they are disorders and that they need to be treated and cured. And so the idea is that you would identify somebody with these differences and diagnose them with a medical problem, and that you would engage in various therapies and interventions to try to correct that problem and conform that person to neurotypical society. And that's very challenging for a neurodivergent person who may be able to mask, which is when they can put on that show of acting neurotypical, but at great emotional and physical cost. So the medical model of disability is basically this idea that people have medical problems that need to be treated and cured. And in response to that, the social model of disability identifies people with neurodivergent conditions and says that these are natural variations, that they are not medical problems, that there is nothing inherently wrong with these people, and that there's no moral negative connotation associated with those people and their traits, that they're not inherently bad, that they are just naturally different. And so the social model of disability says that those conditions are not in and of themselves disabling. It is the society and environment in which those people live that is disabling, and these creation of barriers to people that need to be removed, and those people need to be accommodated so that they can function just as well in the surrounding environments and in the broader society as neurotypical people.
So if that were something that the Louisiana Children's Museum, for example, wanted to get some insight on ways that we can better, so Fish in a Tree is the place to go.
Fish in a Tree is the place to go.
Okay,
for sure.
We will do that. That's why you're here. You mentioned earlier the assets model. What are all of the benefits of neurodiversity?
So the benefits to the individual are vast. We actually have seen and learned a lot from the LGBTQIA+ movement, the idea that these are natural variations in people's sexual orientation and gender identity, and that those differences should be celebrated and normalized and accepted and accommodated and at the very least tolerated. And so we have learned that it takes an enormous emotional toll on a person to be different and to feel different and to be treated different. And when we embrace neurodiversity as a society, but also in the family, in the core unit in which that individual lives, we see that we improve mental health. We see that we empower individuals to become their full functioning selves. We see that we give them a voice to express their needs and desires and to express themselves in a way that was previously, just inaccessible to them. And neurodivergent people have different communication styles and need various communication support accommodations. And when they are given those accommodations, they can be just as communicative as neurotypical people and even innovative in their communication strategies.
So you just said something that I wanted to, the terms that you're using. So if someone is not familiar with the term neurodiversity, they're probably not familiar with neurodivergent, neurotypical. So I'm listening to you use these terms. I just want to make sure that you can define them for us one more time.
Absolutely. So neurodiversity are the natural variations in human neurology. It's an umbrella term that encompasses conditions like autism, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, learning differences like dyslexia and dyspraxia, and other conditions that are neurological and developmental in basis. And then neurotypical is what the majority of people in our society identify as and present as, and that's just the prevailing normative performance of humanity. And so neurotypical is also a natural variation in human neurology. It's just the prevailing variation. And so we refer to that as neurotypical.
Okay. Accommodations and support in the neurodiversity perspective. What are some things that people can do?
So accommodations play a huge role in the idea of neurodiversity and in the neurodiversity perspective. The idea is that accommodations are not a concession and accommodations are not a cure, right? Accommodations are a tool to allow neurodivergent people to live fully and participate fully in society and the built environment. So accommodations can be physical things. They can be sensory items that help people deal with bright lights or loud sounds. So those are dimmable lighting options, or noise canceling headphones, or noise reducing wall treatments. So they can be physical things. They can also be actions. So a lot of times I advise on IEP planning, and some accommodations that are very, very helpful for our neurodivergent students are to have teachers break down into plain language what is expected of the student, and to write down what the implied tasks of each project are, so that there is a full understanding of what is expected of the student and there's no confusion there. They can also be societal changes. So, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in a minute. But the active inclusion of neurodivergent people, the seeking out and including of neurodivergent people in community organizations and in cultural activities, that inviting and accommodating is an accommodation in and of itself.
That's a great point. And I also want to say some of those accommodations that you mentioned, you don't need an IEP for all accommodations. So that's another point. So you can just have some 504 accommodations, but that's a whole other show.
IEPs are a result of the medical model. It's a prescription for changing people into normative performing children, into normative performing children. So we work in the system that exists, but the neurodivergent movement would say that instead of these IEPs, that we would just make all of the physical spaces and all of the curriculum and all of the classrooms, we would make them neuroaccessible, and then that would benefit all students.
Is that part of the universal design? Is that what?
Universal design is a component of accommodation.
Okay.
Yes, they go hand in hand.
So back to Informal World, we do have those accommodations here for sensory-friendly playtime, which is the first Thursday plug. First Thursday of each month. We didn't do it this last week because we were closed, but it's coming up next Thursday, so join us. And I'm going to go ahead.
Just quickly, I wanted to add, since we're talking about IEPs, if you're a parent and you need an advocate to help you prepare or go to your IEP meeting, Fish in a Tree does have people available for that. Yes.
That's great. And there are a lot of parents who need that, so
yes,
that's great to hear. Neuroaccessibility and neuroinclusion. What does the term neuroaccessibility encompass, and how does it contribute to creating inclusive environments?
So neuroaccessibility is just the fact of making an environment, a product, information, or a service accessible, or being able to be used by or interacted with a neurodivergent person. So when we make something accessible, we may make it sensory friendly, or we may make it mess free, or we may make it with clear signage and usability, right? Digital platforms or physical spaces all need clear signage to direct people to where they need to go.
That's something that I'm a big fan of signage.
Yes.
We also had someone recently, we had some play facilitators ask us, when you're trying to tell a child in the museum to slow down, walk, please, and then the parent says, oh, they're not going to understand that. So I'd like to talk to you about some signs that we can have here, maybe like walking feet or things that can make it accessible to the children and their parents, so that if they're not listening to us the typical way that we do it, let's have some more accessibility there.
So the accommodation that you're talking about is actually not something that would happen in the moment. It's a preparation. So we would use social stories for that.
And we have social stories on our website too. So
Great.
Yeah, so the children who sign up for sensory-friendly playtime can look at our social stories on our website before they come. But tell me more, because I'm not sure if we're doing it completely the way that we could be doing it.
Sure. So there's a lot of ways to execute social stories, and they work best when organizations and families use them together.
Okay.
So social stories coming from an organization like the Children's Museum may look like a video on the website that introduces the museum, the concept of a museum, and then offers a social story which explains what the social expectations in that space are. It may be a tour, it may be welcome to the Children's Museum. This is the front door. You'll go through this door, you'll see a desk. That's where your parents will buy tickets. And then you'll go into the museum. And when we're in the museum, we need to be quiet and we need to take soft steps.
And we have that in like just a flat form. I love the idea of doing a video.
Absolutely, absolutely. Videos are best. And then in conjunction with that social story from the Children's Museum, if you empower parents to use similar social stories when preparing their child for the visit, that may be a graphic novel form, that may be in a script form, help your child understand what they're going to be doing. Is the idea.
Okay.
And so I use personally in my own family, I use a lot of social stories. I have 3 neurodivergent children, and it's a constant process. We'll be in the car. Hey guys, we're going to be arriving in 10 minutes. Remember, this is a fancy restaurant, so we want to be on our best behavior, which means we're not going to put our elbows on the table and we're going to use quiet voices. And then it's constant updates about now we're 5 minutes away. Please prepare yourself to be quiet.
Okay.
We're going to have to be quiet for about an hour.
All the expectations.
Yes, you have to be clear and use plain language, and you have to give the information that you want them to know. Nothing can be implicit.
Okay, that's great to know. So we talked about neuroaccessibility. Can you elaborate on the concept of neuroinclusion and how it relates to promoting diversity in various settings?
Absolutely. So neuroinclusion is the proactive and intentional invitation of neurodivergent people into a space, for the purposes of engagement or activity or information sessions, et cetera. Anything that you want to include, the public in or the community in should be neuro-inclusive. Neurodivergent people make up to 20% of the population. It cuts across all age ranges, it cuts across races, it cuts across socioeconomic divides. So that's a lot of people, right? And they're not just children. There are neurodivergent adults. No one grows out of neurodivergence. It's a lifelong condition. And so we need to be accommodating always for all people. But right now, in the course of the movement, we are just now being able to educate organizations about being neuro-inclusive. So this is something new, and it's been a journey, and we're all learning along that journey. But neuro-inclusion can look like having accommodations in place, being receptive to proposed or suggested accommodations, and just starting that conversation with a neurodivergent community. What do you need, and how can we make this space available and welcoming and comforting for you?
Great. That's what we're trying to do.
I applaud your efforts.
And we're so happy that we met you. We were having a sensory-friendly playtime day, and I just couldn't stop talking to Bridget. So I'm so glad she's here to talk to you. I was like, you have to talk to our families. So what about creating neurodivergent friendly spaces at home?
Right, and this is one of my favorite topics to speak on, so I'll try not to launch into like an hour-long presentation.
Y'all can tune out if you don't want to hear. I'd want to hear all of it.
But absolutely. So neuroinclusion and neuroaccessibility really make homes very special places, but they also strengthen family bonds, and they also teach children that they're valuable. There are lots and lots of ways to make your home sensory friendly, neuroaccessible, and neuroinclusive. And some of those ways are in identifying sensory considerations. So you can have sensory zones in your home. You can have areas that you designate as quiet spaces. This room is for quiet times. This is for quiet activities. Or this is where you can be loud. And in our home, we have a room with colored lights, and we have impromptu dance parties, and that's the loud room.
Wow. That sounds like fun.
It's a lot of fun. Communication support, so offering visual supports. So these are visual schedules and visual calendars that help children understand what to expect next and allow them to plan for the future. We also use a lot of posters and flashcards and tablets that have visual representations of things that children often want or need. Also feelings, feeling words, or visual representations of a face that's experiencing a particular feeling, that when children are nonverbal or unable to access their words, that they can point to. And that's still a form of communication.
How far do you go into that? Is it just like main 4 emotions, or is it like just so that you can understand what they're feeling?
It's a full vocabulary.
A full vocabulary. That's great, yeah. Because frustration is not the same as anger, right? So
no, and that's a constant education.
Yeah.
And that's an important education, especially for autistic children who may not be able to identify the feelings that they're experiencing in the moment.
So you're using those tools to build the vocabulary right there too.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's like 1,000 feelings words that we can go through. Okay.
We actually in our home we used laminated feeling wheels.
Yeah.
And so they're colored, and they have the names of the big emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, and then underneath it breaks it down into specific feelings within those categories.
That's great.
So we help our children identify the big feeling and then the specific feeling.
Right. That's awesome. We could do that here too.
Also, there's a lot of organization considerations. So visual clutter can be very overwhelming for neurodivergent people. And I think secretly this is the big secret behind all those organization and home improvement shows.
Yeah.
They're really just organizing everything and putting it behind closed doors, right? They always do the cabinetry with the closed spaces. But for children especially, using large clear bins with labels, either with visual labels with a picture of the elements inside, or a word that identifies like the large category of things that go inside.
Yeah.
It helps children not only help you by being able to put things away where they go, it helps the child to know that everything has a place, and it helps them to reduce their own visual clutter in their own spaces. The rule of thumb is that a person, not just a child, a person can only process 7 things at a time.
Okay.
How many things do you see on classroom walls and floors and ceilings?
Yeah. I've been in some that absolutely, they're lovely classrooms, but some I'm just like, oh my goodness, there's a lot going on in here. And people's homes too. So that's good to know. So we have the parental advocacy for neurodivergent question. How can parents effectively advocate for their neurodivergent children within educational institutions, healthcare systems, and broader communities? And I know this is a big, big question. And I know some people are here to just figure out what is this all about, and some people are here because they are on this journey and they want more information. So I know you can answer more later with Fish in a Tree, but can you touch upon it a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in the education setting, parental advocacy looks like knowing your rights, being educated about the laws that affect you and your children and your family, building relationships with teachers and principals and school staff so that they know what's going on with you and your family and your child, and you know what's going on with them, and you have open communication so that you can make sure that accommodations are being fulfilled, and you can make sure that nothing comes as a surprise to what your child may be struggling with or their successes. Advocating for accommodations, this is a really big one. This is something that we do a lot in Fish and a Tree, is just working with the child to understand what accommodations will be helpful. Not all accommodations are helpful for each person. It's very individualized, and it should be tailored and customized to the individual student. So just coming up with a request for accommodations, is a real it's a real process.
Well, I'm sure you have kids who are like, I don't know what I need.
They don't know,
Yeah.
and why would they? They
Right.
don't know. So you have to explain what's available to them, and then they have to tell you if they think that that would be helpful. And then you have to try it out and see if it is in fact helpful. IEPs are living documents, and they should be amended accordingly. Absolutely. And you really need to attend all the meetings at your school and with your teachers. I recommend that however many parents are in your household, they should all attend
Everybody hears
the
the same
meetings.
message.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that you're all on the same page and you can all voice your concerns and ask your questions in the same time and space. And then you really need to document everything. Schools are not always going to have a copy of that thing that you signed or record every answer to every question that you asked in a meeting. They're very, very busy, and they have a lot of students, and it's really the onus is on the parent to document all of those things and to follow up with the school in requesting documents.
That's great advice. And if someone's feeling like that's not being met, I used to have a PD on this with a special education attorney, and
Yes.
and I'm not going to mention his name because he didn't give me permission to, but I will put it on later if I get permission from him. But he was
Absolutely.
adamant about making sure that if your child's needs aren't met, you need to take action.
Absolutely, that's against the law.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why he was like, I'm an attorney and I'm getting involved. Yeah.
absolutely.
So
That's a good person to know.
can you navigate that process as well at Fish in a Tree, where I don't think our rights are getting met? Can you help me find the right person?
We'll help you find the right person. Yes,
You
absolutely.
do a lot over there.
We do. We're full service.
How long have you been there?
Almost a year.
Almost a year. Congratulations.
Thank you. We're very excited.
Do you have any follow-ups before we ask Holly about online?
No, I'm open to
Okay.
questions at this time.
Do y'all have any questions, Zoom audience?
I always do.
Please.
I think from from a teacher's point of view,
Absolutely.
can you give a little bit of guidance for how can you make your classroom a little bit more neuro welcoming or
Absolutely.
a little bit more reassuring, I guess, for neurodiverse learners,
Yes.
especially in larger class sizes and in spaces where a lot of teaching does seem to take place through anchor charts. How can you help to make that a more welcoming place for neurodiverse students?
Yes. And again, I love to talk about this particular subject, so I'll try not to talk too long about it. But we actually have coming up at the end of the month a retreat for educators who want to be neuroaffirming in their classroom and in educational spaces. So all that information is on our website if anybody is interested in participating in that. But there are many, many ways, and many, many ways that I don't even know about to make your classroom neuroaccessible and neuroinclusive. And so just with broad strokes, painting or covering the walls in soothing, neutral colors, providing sensory-rich environments that are not visually cluttered. So that looks like soft rugs or textured pillows, textured blankets that are all in the same color field. and that don't compete with each other. An idea that I really like, and I wish we could have one here, is a sensory tent, and they can be small and they can be very big. But the idea is that it's a private space for neurodivergent children to be able to regulate the light. You have a drawable curtain, and to be able to regulate the noise. You would have noise-canceling headphones available in the tent, and to visually stim or physically stim in that space in private.
I'll tell Rayanne. Rayanne is our director of the sensory-friendly playtime experience.
Love it.
I also want to give some shout outs to your retreats. I saw what they entail, and they look like a lot of fun.
They're pretty great.
I can't go to that one, but I'm like, I want to go to the next one for sure. They look like a lot of fun. So yeah, tell us about what's coming up at Fish in a Tree.
So on our website, you can find all the information about our current and upcoming programming and our current and upcoming events. But also, if you're interested in a private consultation about a particular issue that you're experiencing in your family or with your child or with your school, you can email me and we can set up a private consultation session or series of sessions to help, either find you the resources that you need or to assist you in resolving your problem.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great resource. You have some webinars coming up?
We do have some webinars. So if you are interested in anything that we discussed today and interested in learning more about your neurodivergent child and empowering them to navigate the world around them and to experience their lives to the fullest, we have a webinar series which starts on Sunday, specifically for parents of neurodivergent children. And all that information is on our website. It's 3 2-hour-long webinars, and we go. It's a deeper dive into many of the topics that we've talked about today. And then we also do a special webinar every few months on sensory spaces in your home, which is very popular and a really good resource. I recommend watching it with your child and seeing what all of their recommendations are to you after they've seen it.
Yeah, and then you have to go straight to Target and start
You
getting
have to go straight to Target afterwards. You have to
We're
reserve
not
a whole
endorsed by
day.
Target unless y'all wanted to sponsor us. That's
Target,
great.
not a sponsor yet.
That's great. I will also put that information on there so people can find those. And I know parents have been asking us, so I'm glad that this resource is out there for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we are wrapping up our neurodiversity and inclusion discussion. We will be back for our In Dialogue series next month, October 10th, with speech and language development. So we're excited about that one too. Register on our website. Maybe at the end of this week, we'll have updated the links. And thanks for being here. And thank you for being here so much.
Thank you for having me, and
Absolutely.
thank you for joining us.
See y'all later.